right, everyone, welcome back to Tooth and Claw Podcast. Jeff is actually on a little trip right now, so this is going to be a Wes and Mike episode. Dad's gone, but we have a special episode. Last week, we talked about Synanon, the cult that actually used a rattlesnake as a weapon to attack someone that, I guess, a detractor or someone that was fighting them. And they used a Southern Pacific rattlesnake, which we talked about at length last week. And as I was researching that episode, I realized there's a lot that I don't know about venom. Venom is very complicated, and we've given some basics on it, but I wanted to learn more. So we reached out to Dr. Spencer Greene. He is director of toxicology at HCA Houston Healthcare Kingwood and has a lot of experience in venom. So Dr. Spencer Greene, we welcome you to Tooth and Claw.
Thanks. Very happy to be here.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've done a lot of different shows, a lot of different podcasts and interviews and whatnot. So this is not your first rodeo when it comes to talking about venom.
My first today, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We can claim that much. You can put at the end of your credential list, appeared on Tooth and Claw podcast. I think that's a marquee staple.
That's how you attract the ladies. Yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could just tell us, to open up with, a bit about your background and how you came to specialize in toxicology and specifically in venom.
Yeah. No, it's kind of a crazy story. So, until I was 5, I wanted to be an ice hockey player. That would not have worked out so well. But when I turned 5, I wanted to be a doctor, and specifically, and I have no idea why, I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. And that lasted through high school. And then at some points, I was like, considering other specialties, but then I became a paramedic. So when I applied to medical school, I figured I would do emergency medicine with the ultimate goal of being a medical director for an EMS agency or whatever. And I went to medical school, for pretty much the entire time there. I'm like, yes, emergency medicine. And then I went down to Vanderbilt in Nashville for my emergency medicine residency program. And I got involved with the local EMS stuff. I was doing some teaching at the university and the paramedic program. But then a few months into my residency, I met Donna Seeger, who was our toxicologist. And at the time, she was already world-renowned. She was the president of the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology. And I realized that she had this whole body of knowledge that most doctors never learn, all sorts of obscure things, all sorts of poisons and side effects of drugs and plants and mushrooms and snakes and other animals and occupational exposures. And I loved everything about tox, but nothing specific about tox. So when residency was over, I had an option. I had a military obligation to fill, and I could have done that right away, or I could have done my toxicology fellowship. And I chose to do my military obligation just to get it over with. So I went up to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright State University, and I started teaching toxicology for the residency program. I basically started out a few weeks ahead of the residents, but over the course of 3 years, I learned a lot. And again, I loved everything about tox, but nothing in particular. Well, during my time on active duty, I got deployed to Iraq. And I was with a special unit, and I can tell you more in 2031 when my 25-year non-disclosure statement expires. But I didn't do a lot of medicine there. I had a lot of downtime, I think I saw 10 patients in 140 days-ish. But one day, I found a snake on our property, a saw-scaled viper. And I had multiple epiphanies. One, it was really hot in Iraq, and I really liked the hot weather. And I was really fascinated with the snakes and the other local fauna. And I'm like, I need to do my fellowship somewhere where I can learn all this stuff. So I did my fellowship in Phoenix, which historically treats among the most bites in the country. And, that was the rest. I fell in love with snake bites and Gila monster envenomations and spider bites and scorpion stings. And, that's what I do primarily now. And if someone had told me 25 years ago that this Jew from Long Island would be famous for treating snake bites in Texas, I would have assumed they were doing drugs. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I'm a wildlife biologist. I work primarily with bears, and I actually initially thought I was going to go into optometry. So I kind of had a similar track into getting into where I got into. That's fascinating. And saw-scaled vipers.
I did but marry an optometrist, so I got that going for me.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Saw-scaled vipers, they're one of the more, some of the more bites in the world come from that snake, right?
Yeah, I think I heard one time, and I don't know if this is still true, I don't know if it was ever accurate, but I heard at one time that they're responsible for more deaths than any other species because there are so many of them, and they're often in places where people can't get medical care.
Okay, because they're found throughout Africa, throughout a lot of different places.
So I actually had a couple of brothers who served in the Marines who also deployed Iraq, Afghanistan. Was that like something that people were schooled on to be wary of the danger of snakes, or
No.
was that just
No.
not
And
at
to
all?
be honest, I only saw one in my entire time there.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Okay.
So, I mean, maybe some people who were in different parts. I was in Balad, so we didn't really have a lot of animals.
Okay. So something we talk about a lot on the podcast when we're talking about venomous snakes is, some basic information about the way that different types of venom in snakes work. And I know the three types that we brought up the most are hemotoxic, myotoxic, neurotoxic venoms. And I was wondering if you could give us just kind of a 101 explanation of
Yeah.
how those three types of venom actually work.
Absolutely. Now, technically, myotoxic would be a fourth one because the most common is actually cytotoxic.
Okay.
Especially people who are familiar with the bites in the US, most of our bites are cytotoxic, and oftentimes they are exclusively cytotoxic. So that means tissue injury, tissue swelling, sometimes tissue necrosis, which could be superficial or it could be full thickness. But cytotoxic means it's tissue injury. Cyto technically means cell, but it's tissue damage. Hematologic toxicity can mean a few things. Sometimes people get bit and they're exposed to hemotoxic venoms or venom components that make them unlikely or unable to coagulate or somehow interferes with their platelets, so they're at risk for bleeding. But hemotoxic venoms can also include things that cause you to clot. And then sometimes you get both effects. So you consume all your clotting factors, so then you bleed because you have nothing remaining. So hemotoxic could be you bleed or you get clots or both. Cytotoxic's tissue injury. Then neurotoxic means it affects your nerves. And sometimes that's isolated to abnormal sensations, what we call paresthesias, or if they're painful, dysesthesias. The more worrisome neurotoxic manifestations include objective weakness, which might be confined to like your eyes or your throat, where you can't open your eyes or your eyelids drag or you can't swallow. The worst manifestations would be skeletal and respiratory muscle paralysis. Then myotoxic, you get muscle damage, which may not correlate to the amount of local tissue injury. So sometimes the tissue doesn't look that bad, but then there's lab evidence of serious muscle breakdown, which can result in weakness as well.
Okay. So as I've kind of done, again, a base level of research into these different types of venom and the types of snakes that have them, it does seem like I tend to see that the neurotoxic ones are the ones that tend to be the most complicated when it comes to a treatment perspective. Am I wrong in that? Are there ones that are more dangerous than others when it comes to venom types?
Certainly neurotoxic are challenging, but what I hear a lot about and what I see on occasion, I practice in Southeast Texas, so I have primarily copperheads and cottonmouths. But when I was in Arizona and when I get called about bites from other parts of the country, some of the most challenging ones are actually the hematologic toxicities. So we see severe thrombocytopenia with timber rattlesnakes, for example, and there's no really effective treatment. And then you mentioned Southern Pacific. Southern Pacifics can certainly be neurotoxic, but they're also often characterized by bleeding and thrombocytopenia, low platelets that we just can't treat. So I think those might be really difficult as well. But yeah, the most dreaded complications from some of our big bad pit vipers include neurotoxicity. For example, the Mojave in California is famous for this. So I did a study a few years ago showing that it's not nearly as common as people have been led to believe, and it's often much more mild than people have been led to believe. A bite from a Mojave in California is not a death sentence, for example. You're not more likely than not going to end up on a ventilator. It's a possibility, but it's not likely.
And there's hundreds of people that get bit by venomous snakes every year in the U.S.
Thousands.
Thousands. Okay.
Yeah, there's 5,000 to 10,000 every year.
And how many fatalities do we see on average in the U.S. from snakebite?
I actually know this really well because I wrote the paper looking at this a few years ago.
Amazing. Yeah.
We looked at a 20-year period from 1989 to 2018, and we found an average of 3.4 fatalities per year.
Okay. So pretty low, especially compared to other countries.
Yes.
Extremely low.
I assume you've probably had cases where you're tending to bite victims who have unfortunately passed away. Is that something that you've dealt with?
No, knock on wood, I have never had a snakebite fatality.
Wow.
I've had some patients with some bad outcomes, like one had a stroke while I was in the hospital. And recently, in a neighboring hospital in my town, it wasn't my hospital, but a neighboring hospital had a fatality just exactly a month ago. No, a month and a day ago. So,
Yeah.
But no, in the 1,500, 2,000 patients I've treated, I have never, fortunately, had a fatality.
So I have to imagine that's a combo in the US of access to really good antivenom and then also not having access to some of these more dangerous types of snakes, like, spectacled cobras,
Right.
Russell's vipers, those kind of snakes that are responsible for a lot of deaths.
Right. So there's a number of factors. Even our most dangerous snakes, I like to gauge, snake danger, if you will, by the untreated lethality rate, meaning what's the likelihood they're going to die if they never seek medical attention. And for some of our pit vipers, it's anywhere from 20 to 40%. Like Mojave's is about 30 to 40%, tiger rattlesnakes up there, whereas like the Western diamondback, Eastern diamondback is closer to 10 to 20%, and the timber rattlesnake's 10%. On the other hand, like copperheads are less than 1%. So part of the reason we have so few fatalities, fortunately, is because the snakes, like you said, on average, aren't as bad as some of the ones found in other parts of the world. The people who do die, they either die in the first few minutes because of a systemic envenomation, or rarely from anaphylaxis, but that requires prior sensitization to snake venoms, or they die usually after about 24 hours because of multi-organ failure, because they were, just had a severe envenomation and they were under resuscitated or whatever. And then, of course, some people don't seek medical attention. It was interesting, in our paper, on our fatalities paper, every death in Kentucky, I think it was, and I think one other state, maybe Georgia, it was a religious leader who was handling a snake who got bitten and then did not immediately or at all seek medical attention.
Makes sense. Yeah. That'll do it.
Yeah.
I've been using Gooder sunglasses for about 8 years now. It all started when I saw my cousin wearing some, and I was like, what are those? I gotta have them. And he said, they're my Gooder sunglasses. But no, really, he let me try them out for a day. I loved how bright all the colors looked, and I thought they looked cool. So I ended up buying a pair. I ended up losing that pair, buying multiple other pairs. But I love the Bosley's Basset Hound Dreams. I've been using those for 8 years, like I said. When I guided fly fishing, I would always use those, and I could always spot the fish under the water better than anyone else. But also, they're just great for everyday use. They're great for jogging because they stay on your head really well. They have no bounce, no slip, 100% polarized, lightweight, comfortable. And the best part, they're only $25, so you don't need to be worried about them everywhere you go. With Gooder, I'm not always stressing out about maybe I might lose them, because you know what? They are really easy to replace, which I appreciate. If you need a new pair of sunnies, Gooder is giving Tooth and Claw listeners free shipping. You can go to Gooder, so that's GOODR.com/tooth, and use code TOOTH for free shipping. Gooder offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and 100% satisfaction. I guarantee you'll like them as well. Again, that's gooder.com/tooth, and use code TOOTH for free shipping.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, so I guess a quick aside question too that I have is I've heard a lot of different pronunciations for antivenom. I've heard
Yes.
antivenin, antivenin, antivenom. What's the proper way to say that?
So 2 of them are acceptable. Antivenin is what was originally used because it was derived from the French. And then antivenom is what is preferred. According to the World Health Organization, in English-speaking countries, the preferred term is antivenom. Antivenin is fine. It drives me nuts when people say antivenin. They sound obnoxious. And I know they don't mean to be, but it's wrong. And the thing I hate even more is when people are typing it and they put a hyphen in the middle. That drives me nuts. There's no hyphen in antivenom.
Yeah.
But yeah, the World Health Organization says antivenom. Now, interestingly, the Associated Press prefers antivenin. Either one's fine, just don't freaking hyphenate it.
Okay.
Deal.
Yeah. I was
And no
saying
antivenin. That's just, yeah.
I was saying antivenin for a hot minute and I was feeling very annoying. So I'm glad you said that it
I
is
hate that.
because yeah.
Wes did self-correct though, so
Good.
yeah,
Did.
he didn't need
Yeah.
any outside influence to change course on that one.
So I guess then, where you specialize in the Southeast, but you have this body of knowledge about snakes within the United States,
Yes.
which species that people might come into contact with in the United States would you consider the most dangerous venomous species?
So the most dangerous is probably the Mojave. Now, people have looked at the LD50s of different snake venoms. And I think most people think the tiger rattlesnake has the most potent venom. But potency, while important, is actually less important than the total volume delivered. It's the volume that determines the badness the most. And the combination of the potency and the volume of the Mojave rattlesnake makes it the most dangerous. Now, you'll hear some people say, oh, the most dangerous snake is the one that bit you. That's a nice little cliche, but it's stupid. The most dangerous one, the one that's most likely to kill you, is the Mojave rattlesnake.
Okay.
And I want to point out, people always talk about coral snakes, cousins of the cobra. They'll kill you. Yeah, no. There's never been a death from the Arizona coral snake. There's no documented human fatalities from the Texas coral snake. And the last death from an eastern coral snake was in 2006. It was a drunk guy who did not seek medical attention. And there's been fewer than 5 in the last 100 years. So coral snakes are not the most dangerous, not even close.
And I think I understand why. And that's because for a coral snake to really, deliver a lot of venom, it really needs to chew on you. It's not like a striking snake, like a rattlesnake.
So they don't deliver venom as efficiently as pit vipers. Pit vipers are like, the apex venom delivers. It's like, phew. But It's a myth that coral snakes have to chew. They absolutely do not have to chew. But they have small, fixed front fangs, and they're not as efficient. But the other thing is, even though the venom might be potent, they don't deliver a lot of venom.
Got it. Great. So another question I had here, we've covered some basic safety information in our episodes about venomous snakes. The point that I've really tried to drive home is that you hear a lot of information about things you can do if you're bitten, but really the two most important things from what I've read is that, you get your keys and your phone, you call for medical attention, and you get to medical attention as quickly as possible.
Right.
Everything else is kind of window dressing. I'm curious if there's anything you want to add to that, if there's any other information.
So, everything you said is just right. Although I would point out that I don't encourage snakebite victims to drive themselves. Maybe call an Uber or call somebody else. But basically get to medical attention. And in the interim, don't do anything stupid. Things that have been proposed in the past to treat snake bites range from useless at best to harmful at worst. So many things that were once recommended should not be done. One of the worst ones is a tourniquet. Tourniquets are great if you have life-threatening bleeding, but cutting off the arterial blood supply to an envenomed limb is just going to, condemn it to more tissue injury and maybe entire tissue loss. Cutting and sucking is stupid. It doesn't work. And, first of all, you're introducing mouth flora into something that's not usually going to get infected, and cutting into something is just going to make things worse. But the funny thing is, you can't actually remove venom with suction, whether it's your mouth or using one of those extraction devices. But if you could, theoretically, if you had a lesion in your mouth, you could absorb that venom. And, personally, the people I've seen try to do this cutting and sucking are the ones who are likely to have lesions in their mouths. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay.
So, the extraction devices don't work. The best editorial ever, or best titled editorial ever, came out in 2004. February 2004, my friend Sean Bush wrote an editorial in Annals of Emergency Medicine. It said, extraction devices don't remove venom. They just suck. And it's true. These things don't help. Nothing else. Using electricity. I hear so many people say, venom is protein. I want to denature the protein. You know what else is protein? People. You don't want to denature the people. I know it's cool in a Tarantino sort of way to hook your friends up to a car battery, but it's stupid. If you're lucky, you'll just burn them. Otherwise, you'll kill them. And then ice. So this is the challenging one. My friends, I have a lot of friends who've been bitten. They tell me ice makes them feel better. But the problem is we know that prolonged ice is absolutely harmful to the tissue. It's reasonable to do 5 minutes on, 10 minutes off. What I see so often, though, is either with the victims or like EMS or whatever, they'll just throw the ice pack on and leave it there. And that's harmful. If you can do just a few minutes on, a longer period off, that's okay. But in general, the pre-hospital stuff is just not going to help. Get to the right place and don't do anything stupid.
So the right place, I would assume, like the best ideal circumstance would be to get to somewhere with a toxicologist like yourself. Is it reasonable to expect any major health organization, or not even major, but like anywhere you go, will they have someone that you think will be fully capable of dealing with the situation or not?
Not at all. So, and that's a great question. I'm in Houston, which is one of the biggest cities in the country, and there's a whole bunch of hospitals here. And I don't want to throw my colleagues up under the bus, but I'm going to. Frankly, most of them around here suck. They are terrible. Most hospitals have antivenom, but what I'm constantly telling people is that it takes more than Antivenom. It takes someone who knows when and how to use it, and what else to do, and what else not to do, and how long to watch the patients. I'm involved with a group on Facebook called National Snakebite Support, and every day, every single day, we hear about patients who were watched for 2 hours and then discharged without any labs, and then they come in the next day with their entire limbs swollen and blistering, with their labs all abnormal. So many places are so bad at this. So no, you want to go to a place with an expert. And most hospitals aren't going to have a toxicologist. There's only about 600 of us in the country, and we're not evenly distributed. There's entire states without toxicologists. And interestingly, some of the toxicologists in the Northeast have never treated a snakebite. So they have some rudimentary training in fellowship, but they don't have any experience. Conversely, you don't have to be a toxicologist. One of the nation's experts on snakebites is Chuck Gerardo out of Duke. He's not a toxicologist, but there's no one in the galaxy who knows more about copperhead bites than he does. So you want to identify beforehand where are the places where they have knowledgeable people and the skills to manage the entire bite.
So in like a hypothetical situation, if you can't end up somewhere in the ideal place to get it treated, what would you advise patients to do in that circumstance to kind of like vouch for themselves to make sure they're getting the best treatment?
There's all these guidelines that are readily available online. The most famous is the Unified Algorithm, which came out in 2011. And there's a new version that's currently undergoing the peer review process. I'm one of the authors of that one. And, we emphasize certain things, including watching bites for a minimum of 8 hours, even if they have no symptoms, and if they have any symptoms, 12 to 24 hours, and having a low threshold to treat with antivenom. So there's the Unified Algorithm, there's the American Academy of Emergency Medicine guidelines, there's the Wilderness Medicine guidelines. We have a new version coming out later this year as well, and I'm one of the authors of that. And I authored the American Academy of Emergency Medicine guidelines. There are things online that people can see what should happen. People have to advocate for themselves because oftentimes their treating physician might not be familiar with snake bites.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we did an interview of a girl who had been bitten, I think by a Southern Pacific. She was in Joshua Tree, and she went to the hospital, and they just did not give her enough antivenom, and then wanted to do a fasciotomy. And she found like a Facebook group that was advocating for, her advocating for herself, and had listened to the podcast too, and really pushed for more antivenom, and they ended up giving it to her, and she recovered. But almost had to do a fasciotomy, which would have been, a very kind of, I don't know too much about what a fasciotomy entails, but I know it was a lot more than she wanted to do. So
or needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. And I'm glad we talked about that, because I do want our listeners to advocate for themselves if they are ever bitten. Hopefully they aren't. Thanks for asking that, Mike. We had a couple other questions here. I'm curious, just what's your favorite venomous snake?
Well, hopefully my mom won't watch this podcast because she doesn't know about this, but the white-whipped tree viper is my favorite.
We'll blur it out for you.
Yeah.
The white-whipped tree viper is my favorite snake in the world.
That's cool.
The Trimerestrus albolabris, but I also love coral snakes. My favorite native snake is definitely the Texas coral snake.
Cool. White-lipped tree vipers, they're in Komodo. Is that one?
They are in Thailand.
Okay. Cool.
They're responsible for almost all the significant envenomations in Thailand.
All right.
There's other Trimerestrus species throughout the southeast.
Yeah. When it comes to snakes around the world, what do you think is the snake that you would least want to get bit by?
So it's really funny. We talk about this a lot. Certain snakes I wouldn't want to get bit by in certain locations, but I'd be fine in other locations. For example, in Africa, I wouldn't want to be bit by a mamba because I'm likely so far from definitive medical care that there's a good chance I'll die.
Yeah.
But I had a friend get bitten by a black mamba a few years ago in Houston, and he was 30 minutes away from the hospital. That's great. He went home the day, 2 days later. In fact, he could have gone home the next day, but we kept him just for observation. And that was after he was on the ventilator for a day. I'd rather get bit by a mamba in the United States than a rattlesnake, because after 24 hours, I'm going to be fine from the mamba bites, but I might have significant tissue injury for days to weeks after the rattlesnake bite. But if I'm in Africa, I'd rather have a bunch of tissue injury than be dead.
Yeah.
So it really depends on where I am. Obviously, some of the Australian snakes are really potent. The Malaysian blue coral snake can be really painful and can cause significant skeletal and respiratory muscle paralysis. So,
okay.
I've heard, and maybe this is a myth you can help dispel if it's in your wheelhouse, but I've always heard, I'm a diver, so I spend time in the water, that sea snakes are often more venomous. than terrestrial. Is that
So
true? Or
they have really potent venom, but it's really hard to get bitten by one of those. You basically have to go up to it, stick your hand in its mouth and squeeze its head. They have no desire to bite you. They know they're not going to eat you.
Good to know.
So you really have to make an effort to get bitten by a sea snake. But yes, their venoms are potent, but there's not a lot of volume, and more importantly, they have no desire to just inject you with that venom.
This episode is brought to you by Element. Do you struggle with headaches, muscle cramps, and fatigue on a low-carb diet, also known as the keto flu? You're probably low on electrolytes, especially sodium. There are 2 reasons why low-carbers tend to be low on sodium. Whole food keto diets are naturally low in dietary sodium, and you excrete more sodium in a carb-restricted state. Fortunately, this means preventing keto flu is often as simple as consuming more electrolytes. The problem? Most of the electrolyte products on the market are either loaded with sugar or are woefully lacking in actual electrolytes. And trust me, I've tried to go low carb before, and it's super, super tough. But I can tell you from personal experience, if you get something a little bit sweet and a little bit salty, aka Element, it makes it so much easier. It curbs all of those hunger pangs, and it just tastes amazing. It's awesome. Element was created by former research biochemist Rob Wolf and KetoGains founder Louis Villaseñor. And it has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to move the needle and get you feeling and performing your best. Plus, it has 0 sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients to derail your low-carb lifestyle. And it honestly has become my go-to electrolyte drink, and I really do trust it to keep me feeling my best, hydrated, healthy, fit, ready to go. So Element came up with a fantastic offer just for us. Get your free sample pack with any Element purchase at drinklmnt.com/tooth. Be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water.
That leads really well into my next question, which I'm curious, in your opinion, worldwide, which species of venomous snake would you consider the most dangerous? So that's including the whole package, like willingness to bite, venom load, venom toxicity, everything.
So we're not talking about like access to care and stuff like that, just the snake itself.
Yeah, in a vacuum, not access to care, just you're in a room with the snake. Which one do you least want in that room with you?
I mean, classically, the answer is the taipan, but, the gaboon viper has a huge fangs, delivers a lot of venom. That's bad. Saw scales, again, account for a lot. Russell's viper is pretty bad. Boomslang, bleed to death. So
yeah. Okay. So those are some of your top picks. Okay. I know when we talked about Russell's vipers, there was some really interesting stuff about like reverse puberty, a few like weird things that they can do to your hormones and whatnot when you're bitten by a Russell's viper. Have you heard anything about that?
A little bit. I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with them as with some other species,
That makes sense where you're based out of Houston too.
Well, it's funny. I do treat a lot of non-native bites because in Texas you can own whatever you want, but I've never treated anyone with a Russell's viper. So I'm more familiar with various cobras and mambas and such.
Yeah, they're not a big collector snake either, so that makes sense.
Okay. Maybe this isn't even a logical question. It's just something that came to mind. But if a venomous snake bit another venomous snake, even of the same species, are they like resistant or immune to the toxins passed on from the others?
So it's funny. Some are, some aren't. It kind of depends on the species, and and then of course some species have greater resistance to certain. Even some non-venomous snakes have some resistance to venom, from certain species, and then non-snakes have varying degrees of resistance. People are always asking, why aren't we making antivenoms from opossums? Because they have, they're immune to snake venom. They're not so much immune as they're highly resistant, but commercially we have not used possums to make antivenom.
Okay. Interesting. I had no idea that possums were like.
Yeah, there's some people doing some really good work looking into it. And maybe someday maybe we'll have some products derived from possums as a result. But.
Okay.
Oh, that's actually something I wanted to ask about, because obviously, and for good reason, there's a lot of negative association with like envenomation, venom, toxins, etc. But I also know that a lot of those same venoms are used in research and development of like new therapies and treatments and stuff. Is that part of your world at all, is like contributing to the positive contributions that venom can have to the world at large, or is that something you're knowledgeable about what's going on?
Okay, I apologize. I missed half. So you said how venoms are beneficial? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Just some of them can be used for like therapies and
Absolutely,
treatments and
yeah.
stuff.
So one of the most commonly prescribed class of drugs for hypertension are ACE inhibitors. The original ACE inhibitor, captopril, came from the Jararaca, Bothrops jararaca.
Okay.
So that's a huge thing.
Yeah. Huh.
There are some, antiplatelet medications used for cardiac patients that are derived from snakes. And then beyond snakes, what's huge right now, Ozempic and similar drugs. These are all GLP agonists. The original Mac Daddy GLP agonist was exenatide, which comes from the Gila monster, which incidentally was responsible for the absolute worst envenomation I've ever seen. And then beyond that, yeah, I'll tell you about that in a second if you want.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
there's a medicine we use for people with chronic pain. It's given intrathecally, and it's called ziconotide, and it comes from cone snails. Yeah, there are literally dozens of venoms that are being used in varying degrees. Some are on the market, some are being studied. People have looked at contortritoxin from copperheads as a treatment for breast cancer. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's already out there or in the works, and some of those may pan out.
Another reason to like snakes, right?
Yeah.
Go snakes.
I knew about the Gila monster Ozempic connection, but now that you brought it up, I'm very curious to hear about this Gila monster envenomation.
It's like, now I publish a ton. 15 years ago, I was not good about doing that scholarly activity stuff, and I regret it, because this would have been like the best case report ever. So there's this guy. He had 6 previous snake envenomations. He had lost one of his thumbs to a snake envenomation. And he woke up one morning in southern Arizona, and he decided, well, first he had, his typical breakfast of 2 pitchers of beer. Then he decided he wanted to be a pirate. I can tell you, there's a conspicuous absence of parrots in southern Arizona. So instead of putting a parrot on his shoulder, he put a Gila monster, which shortly thereafter bit him on the neck.
Ugh.
Went to the first hospital. He had massive airway swelling. His blood pressure plummeted, and he had horrible diarrhea, which is redundant because there's no good diarrhea. And they gave him everything, and they forced a tube down his throat, and they gave him all sorts of meds and treatments, and they flew him to us. He actually arrived about 10 minutes after a woman who had a rattlesnake bite, and she was stable. And I said something to her that I've said to none of my 1,000 bite victims before or since. I said, "Excuse me, I'm going to go see somebody more interesting." And this guy, he looked like the Michelin Man. He was so edematous. And they forced a tiny tube down his throat. We actually switched it out. And he stayed on the ventilator for 8 days.
Wow.
Because he was that sick. Yeah.
That's crazy. And their whole system of venom delivery is completely different.
It is. It's much more rudimentary. It just basically the venom travels in the grooves of their teeth, and they really they clamp on, and sometimes it's really difficult to remove the Gila monster from the victim.
Huh. So I know in other lizards, they think now, and venom experts like yourself or whoever think that maybe some of the varanids, monitor lizards, whatnot, might have a rudimentary type of venom as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I lectured on this in Denver in 2023. Was it? Yeah, in 2023, I talked about venomous lizards of North America. So I focused on Gila monsters and beaded lizards, but I did spend 5 minutes because it's going to come up. Is the Komodo dragon venomous or not?
Mm-hmm.
And some people say yes, some people say no. I say it is not.
Okay.
Well, it depends on how you define venom. If you use a very loose definition, then they are, but then so are humans, because we have components in our saliva that aid in digestion. So if you define venom very loosely, then yeah, they are, but so are we. If you use a more narrow definition of venom, then humans are not, and nor are Komodo dragons.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm glad you answered that, because even when I did hours of research into that, and I couldn't find what I considered like a straight answer on that.
Yeah,
so
I would say they're not. I know I have some colleagues who say they are. They're wrong. It's okay.
Yeah. Appreciate that. All right. I got 1 or 2 other questions for you. We tend to talk about movies a lot, even though we're a wildlife podcast. I'm curious if there's any snake bite scene in a movie that stands out for you, like a favorite snake bite scene from a movie.
Well, naturally I have to address snakes on a plane.
Yeah.
It's an entertaining movie. It is a ridiculous movie. It's nonsensical from start to finish. So it's frustrating from a toxicology standpoint for so many reasons, not the least of which they got a herpetologist, not a toxicologist. Herpetologists don't treat people.
Yeah.
We treat herpetologists. That movie's insane. But yeah, I saw that question. I'm wondering, are there any scenes I really like? Now, everyone asked me about Lonesome Dove. I've not seen Lonesome Dove, so I can't comment on other than, yes, I know someone died. It was a bunch of cottonmouths, I guess. But I've never actually seen the movie. But literally, someone asked me about this yesterday while I was working out. My favorite movie that has anything to do with the snake, my favorite movie of all time is actually Escape from New York. And of course, the protagonist is Snake Plissken. He's got a cobra tattoo.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
We'll accept that answer.
Yeah, so that's my favorite movie. And it's funny because I've actually, when I'm having some of my delusions of grandeur, I actually sometimes think of myself as Snake Plissken because, he's got a bad eye and I'm mostly blind in my left eye. He has a snake tattoo. I've got a snake tattoo. For part of the movie, he walks with a limp. Before I had back surgery, I walked with a limp.
You're like the same person. It's crazy.
And it takes place in New York. I'm from New York. But the film was actually filmed primarily in St. Louis, where I went to college. So I'm like, this is my cinematic spirit animal.
There you go.
Perfect. I like it. Well, I got one more, and then Mike, if you have anything else, you can ask too. But we again on Tooth and Claw, we like to educate people about potentially dangerous wildlife because often we learn that it's human error that leads to these interactions, negative interactions, not so much the animal being aggressive or anything. And I think with snakes, that's especially true. Often people we've learned are bitten on the hands because they're trying to handle the snake. And a lot of these snakes even give us a physical warning before they bite us. So I'm just curious if you have anything you'd like to say to advocate for the general role of snakes in their ecosystems and why they're important. Yeah.
Okay. And I want to address two things. So snakes are important, even beyond what we've already talked about, how, they contribute to various, medicinals and of course, antivenom, which is, made by making antibodies to the snake venom. They have an important role in the ecosystem. They're great for vermin control. And of course, rats, mice spread diseases through the things that are on them. So they have an important role. But honestly, even if they didn't, so what? There's a lot of people I consider useless, but we're not, actively trying to remove them from society. They belong here. They have a right to be here. But that said, they're also, beautiful creatures who are part of the ecosystem, even if they didn't directly benefit us. But they do because of the medicinals. But I want to point out, there's so much misinformation about how bites happen. Mm-hmm. Most bites do not happen following intentional interaction. Multiple studies, including two I've been involved with, found that it's between like 10 and 20% that result from people intentionally messing with the snake. The study we published, I think in 2013, we found that only 19% were the result of intentional interaction. Most people get bitten by the snake when they're not aware of it. And I have a paper coming out in a little while that looks at how bites happen at different times of the day. And we found, at least in Southeast Texas, a lot of the bites in the morning were people sticking their hands where they can't see it, whether they were gardening or, reading meters, stuff like that. And at night, a lot of the bites were to the lower extremity because they were walking outside in the dark, wearing either no shoes or inappropriate shoes, and then they step on or near the snake. The number of bites that come from people grabbing the snake on purpose, like when they're aware of it, it's minimal. Now, that's not true for coral snakes. To get bitten by a coral snake, usually you have to mess with it. I've only had 3 coral snake bites that were the result of bad luck. The rest were people messing with the snake. Now, sometimes it was good intentioned messing, like there was a kid who was trying to save the coral snake from the road and he got bit in the process. Another time, there was a kid who was camping and the leader of the camping trip told him it was actually a safe snake to pick up, so he picked it up and it was a coral snake, so he misidentified it. But yeah, in general, most bites happen when people are unaware of the snake. So the advice I'd give people is, wear appropriate footwear, especially outside at night, and never stick your hand in a place you can't see where snakes live. Like where I live, there are no venomous snakes. In my neighborhood, there are no venomous snakes, so I can go stick my hands, feet, wherever. But if you're in a place where there's snakes, always be aware of where your hands and feet are, especially, and use flashlights, wear appropriate footwear.
That's great. Thank you. I'm glad I asked you that question because I think a lot of the stuff I'd read online said that, it was people messing with snakes. So it's good to talk to an expert
and we, like I said, we had a paper that showed 19% were intentional. My colleagues from University of Arizona using a completely different data set, it was like 12.6%. And, using the North American Snakebite Registry, the updated data, I think it's something like 14.5%. So really, it's a minority of people who are messing with the snake. Now, people who have multiple bites in their lifetimes, they're usually messing with snake. And that's the paper I'm working on today, actually, in the presentation I'm doing at Venom Week. But yeah.
Amazing. Or if it's a Gila monster or a coral snake or something like that, you're probably messing with it.
Yes.
Got it. Life's been a little bit crazy for me lately. There's just been a lot on my plate. New pets, wildlife papers for research, the podcast. There's just constantly something to do. And sometimes it can be a little tricky for me to unwind. Well, cornbread hemp CBD gummies have really been a lifesaver for me. Tried a lot of different CBD products, and for me, cornbread hemp is the one that's really made the biggest difference. It's really helped me calm down, relax, get into a state, especially in the evening, where I can just kind of unwind and not really think about all the stuff that I have on my plate, which is really important. It's important that we're able to kind of disconnect from all of that every once in a while and truly relax. And cornbread hemp CBD gummies are made to help you feel better, whether it's stress, discomfort, or if you just need a little relaxation. They only use the best parts of the hemp plant, the flower, which is the purest and most potent CBD. They're formulated to help relieve discomfort, stress, and sleeplessness, and they're all third-party lab tested and USDA organic to ensure safety and purity. For me, it's not only important that I have a product that works, but one that's pure, that's made with good ingredients, that's not going to have any weird side effects. That's why I really like cornbread hemp. I know that I'm getting something that's not only effective, but it's also really clean and just isn't going to be bad for me. And you don't want to take anything that's bad for you, especially when you're trying to take something that's going to help you. Right now, Tooth and Claw listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/tooth and use code TOOTH at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/tooth and use code TOOTH. Mike, do you have anything you want to ask before we let Spence go?
I think the one thing that's gone unanswered is, have you ever been envenomated yourself?
Not yet. Just a matter of time. So almost twice. Back on election night 2008, I was talking to a friend while walking outside in my car. I had just driven down from Phoenix to Tucson to interview for my job at University of Arizona. And while walking outside in the parking lot barefoot, I almost stepped on a juvenile Western diamondback rattlesnake. And then one time, I was taking care of a kid with a snake bite, and they had brought in the dead copperhead. So I was carrying it around, showing people, and that dead copperhead started thrashing about because it was less dead than I realized. So I have not been envenomed yet. You know, the odds are better than 50% that I will at some point, because I go looking for snakes, and I'm blind in one eye. But yeah, as of right now, I've only had bites from non-venomous snakes.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
we're gonna knock
the
on
old
wood
Princess
for you.
Bride almost nearly dead or whatever it is. I love that snakes can do that. Just keep living even when they're not.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time. If we ever have like some unanswered question, I may email you and ask you, just so we're not ever spreading any false information. But thank you so much for talking to us, Dr. Greene.
Thank you, Spence.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep. All right. We'll see you later.
All right.
All right. So for the back half of this episode, we have another special guest. We're here joined by Jeff Larson, podcaster extraordinaire. Jeff, welcome to Tooth and Claw.
Thank you. Yeah, Wes said that last interview was a little too intelligent for me, and he didn't think I could hang, but he said I could come do the pop culture stuff still.
Yeah. Now that we're going to talk about stupid shit, Jeff's welcome back.
He's like, you're perfect for this second part, Jeff.
All right. Well, we just talked to a venom expert, Dr. Spencer Greene, who is a toxicologist. Great conversation, really fun. I learned a lot of things from him, and then I learned we'd been saying some stuff wrong. So, Jeff, just so you know, more people are bitten by snakes just because of like surprise encounters than people that are handling them, which we had said that most snake bites come from people like trying to mess with snakes. So we got that wrong.
I knew that.
And then you knew that. Okay. I should have had you interview this guy. And then also, he doesn't think Komodo dragons have venom, and he's like an expert on that. So,
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What do they have?
They have like proteins in their saliva that some people think are venom, but he said if they have venom, then we have venom. So maybe we have
just
venom.
really gross spit, basically.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a good conversation. But let's move on to our categories. Our first one is one I came up with. It is, I want you guys to rank Venom, the like anti-hero, or would you say he's a villain? I think he's a villain. Rank Venom among the Spider-Man villains.
Well, he's not cooler than Green Goblin. I know that for much.
Yeah. Well, let's hear where he is in your ranking then, Mike.
2, I guess. Well, who else are we even talking about? Let's do Green Goblin is number 1.
Green Goblin's your first?
Yeah, how about that?
All right. I actually wrote mine down and ranked them because I,
Oh.
did the assignment. So I went with Carnage number 1, Venom number 2, because I just liked how Carnage is like essentially Venom, but a lot more destructive. Green Goblin was 3. Lizard was my
What?
4th. I really just like a big lizard as a Venom
He's maybe my number
or as a
1.
villain. Yeah.
His whole goal is just to make people reptiles.
Yeah, turn everyone into lizards.
Is that what he's trying to do?
That's like his whole mission is he thinks that humans need to evolve into lizards.
That's great. He's my number 1. He's my new number 1. I'll go with the big rhino guy too in front of Venom.
Just a rhinoceros.
He just turns into a rhino, and that's sweet.
Just so everyone knows, Mike and Jeff are sharing a mic right now because
We're
they're
sharing
both
a mic.
Yeah, and Mike's being.
I feel like I'm doing a good
cautious.
job, but I don't know what Mike's doing.
pointed
You're
right
like
at you.
afraid of.
You have to lean in.
Just look at me.
Okay,
when you
let's
talk.
go like this, Jeff.
I also had
Oh,
I had Doc Ock in my list. I think of all the like Tobey Maguire villains, he was my favorite. And then in the cartoons, Morbius was my favorite, but not in the live action ones.
it's
So-
morphin time.
It's
Yeah,
more
Morbin.
bin time.
Morbin time. Yeah.
He's
All
gonna
right, Jeff.
morb.
Do you know where Venom falls in your list? You kind of got invited to the categories last minute, so
Yeah. I never thought Green Goblin was cool. Why do you think Green Goblin's cool?
Mostly because of Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
I'm not really like a big Spider-Man guy. I don't know anything really outside the context of mostly the Tobey Maguire movies.
all right. I'm a big
Um,
Spider-Man guy. I watch the cartoon a lot.
I would probably put him third. I'd go the lizard guy, then Doc Ock,
Kurt Connors.
and then Venom.
Yeah. All right.
Venom's just not. I don't really know Venom's goal.
Yeah, it's a symbiote. It's trying to like take over a new planet, but Venom kind of fights it and makes it
Yeah.
just kind of like a fun superpower. But yeah, I think Venom's a great villain. I don't like him as much when he's like a hero. So that's where
It
I'm
would have
at.
been fun to have like the Venom and the Tom Hardy and the what's the Spider-Man or Tom Holland. Like a crossover, the
Tom
Toms.
squared. Yeah.
Get your Professor Tom Smith in there too.
Yeah. All right, Mike, you had a good category about venoms and poisons. You want to ask your question?
Oh, yeah. So toxicology, it's not all just about venom, it turns out. Toxinology, especially, that's a new word I learned. So would you rather be poisonous or venomous? What would you want? And how would you want to deliver your load? Yeah, I think that's what the word they use.
I think I'd rather be poisonous because I feel like if you're poisonous, you're only delivering your load if you're like being attacked, you don't ever have to be the aggressor. And I think that's how I'd want it. I think I just want people to know like, oh, I can't do anything to that guy because it might hurt me. Well, I guess that can be venom though too. I'm going to take that back. I think
That
I'd rather be
sounded like
venomous.
Venom when you described all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'd rather be venomous because you have to like get eaten to be poisonous usually, or like through their skin. So yeah, I'd rather be venomous. I don't want to
Black
get
Widows are venom or poisonous, right?
Venomous.
Black Widows are venom.
Venom's always
so it's
injected.
like a tree frog or something is poisonous.
Like a poison dart frog, or like a puffer fish is poisonous.
Yeah.
Something you either eat or that is absorbed through your skin is going to be poison. Venom is always injected, so it's bitten or a barb. And I think if I'm venomous, I want a barb. I want to have like a
do you
stingray.
have an argument for poisonous even, Mike?
No, not really. Well, so poison, can you like control it? Because it feels like if you just lick a poison dart frog, you're gonna get a little poisoned, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like there's no hugging or kissing or anything.
It
you're gonna
depends
be
on
able
it
to do.
depends on the species. Like a puffer fish, you could like lick and you'd be fine, but you can't.
That's
eat
good to
'em.
know.
But like a dart frog, you can't lick because their poison is excreted through their skin. So
Okay.
it just depends on the species. So you could
Well, there
be
you go.
poisonous and excrete it through your skin. But I think I'm gonna be venomous, and I'm gonna have a barb that like if I can like have that barb shoot out and inject if I need it to.
Yeah, I want to be venomous and I want it to be just like my pinky finger.
Yeah.
and I can inject venom because I feel like I won't have too many. I'll for sure have some accidental envenomations, but at least my other fingers are longer. So I have to be like, to get my pinky finger to inject someone, it's more deliberate, If it's
Yeah.
like your biggest finger, then you're going to be accidentally envenomating everyone.
Yeah.
Mm.
Maybe
You
I'll
can
wear a
control when
glove a
you
lot
do
of
it,
the
though.
time.
Ooh, like Rogue.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
OJ.
Yeah. Did he wear them a
I'm
lot
gonna
of
go
the time?
teeth,
All right.
fangs, delivery, because you can control when it comes out and when it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
You probably leak a little bit though, so you probably taste just a faint hint of venom everything you're eating. Maybe not.
I mean, this is a
You
hypothetical,
leak.
so we can control that, right? Yeah.
I should have set the rules up a little stricter, huh?
All right. I like those answers. Let's move on. So another one we had was if you had to, so Dr. Greene, Spence, really specialized in his career, venoms, and it seemed like snakes were really like his real bread and butter. So if you guys had to specialize in your career, you can either say podcasting or any career or job that you've held in the past in a very substantial way. If you had to specialize, what would you want to do? I'll go first. So if I could specialize in any aspect of bear biology, I would really just want to dive into attacks. That's kind of what Tom did in a way. I just think they're the most interesting part. I guess in a way, it's kind of what I'm doing. But if I could just be like the guy in the world for bear attacks, that would be my dream when it comes to bear biology.
You like bear attacks.
I just think they're really interesting. And it'd be cool to be like the guy that everyone consults when they need some information about a
Do
bear
you wish
attack.
there were more?
I don't, but I do think they're very fascinating.
Really?
What's your guys' answer?
I'd do podcasting still where I'm at, but like
Mhm.
I'd want to be like the huge guys, and be able to influence who becomes president.
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool.
All right. Yeah. So your specialization is just being the most popular podcaster.
Yeah.
All right.
With audio production, I want to be the guy that like tapes wires to informants and stuff, that like sneaks into meetings.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's good.
that's
What's
my
that?
role.
What's that documentary about the like killer who like had a hot mic when he was peeing, and he's like,
Oh yeah,
"You
Jinx
did
or
do it."
something?
The jinx.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could do that.
that's me.
That would be an interesting job too, because if they did get caught and like killed, you would just kind of be like, whoops.
Yeah, I mean, like in Blowout, you seen the John Travolta movie Blowout? I
don't
mean,
think so.
he gets. Well, I
Blowout?
shouldn't spoil anything then, but it's
Yeah.
great. You got to
Oh,
watch that.
good one.
All right. These days, it seems like my allergies never really stop. I live in a house with a dog and a cat. I'm allergic to both of them. Slightly allergic. It's not terrible, but I am allergic to them. And I'm really tired of just buying over-the-counter meds that don't handle all my symptoms. They just don't cut it for me. And I knew I deserved a better option. Enter Allermy. Allermy is the first and only custom nasal spray that will treat your specific symptoms. Those standard medications don't work for everyone, and specialists can be really hard to find. Effective, accessible, and affordable allergy care from Allermy means you're free to do what you love all year long without allergies getting in the way. For me, that's being able just to play and interact with my pets without having to worry about getting itchy eyes, a wheeziness, a drippy nose, or congestion. It's fast relief that's tailored just to your allergies. They have a 95% patient satisfaction rate and over 12,000 five-star reviews. Allermy's nasal sprays have been effective for allergy sufferers across the country, and they can help you too. What makes Allermy different than other allergy medications? Well, they have a team of allergy experts that formulate your nasal spray with multiple active ingredients based on your symptoms, your severity, and your medical history. Their custom combination of FDA-approved ingredients means you get medication that you can trust to work. Upgrade your allergy relief with Allermy. Head to allermy.com and use code TOOTH at checkout for 60% off your order. Once again, that's allermy.com and use promo code TOOTH for 60% off. Make sure you use our promo code TOOTH so that they know that we sent you. That's ALLERMI.com, promo code TOOTH. Okay, let's see what else we got here. 3 bands you're currently into. I'm just curious what music you guys are listening to right now.
So for me, whenever I travel, I always listen to L1011. They're an instrumental duo. They make the pretty prolific, and they just have the perfect vibe for me to like have something really, really cool to listen to, but also I don't need to be, it doesn't demand my attention. It's just like comfortable music to drift off to sleep to on planes. I'm really into Panic at the Disco, specifically their second album, Pretty Odd. It's their best by far, and maybe their only good one. That's not true. I'm not going to be that much of a hater. They have great music, but that band, that album is like Beatles worship almost, and I love
What's
the
his
Beatles.
name? Brendan Urie? Yeah.
Yeah. And then a Japanese artist named Fuji Kaze that one of our listeners turned me on to in India. Thank you, Sarah. Really, really beautiful, soulful music. And been listening to that guy a lot.
Go ahead, Wes. I don't have much on this.
Okay. The 3 I picked were Broncho, which is Jesse's favorite band right now. They're kind of one of those bands that continually is evolving, and they just released an album that's just really, really good. I like every track on it. Jesse loves every track on it. Really like them. Brent, our cousin Brent, recently told me to listen to the Lambrini Girls, which is a punk band. I forget where they're from, somewhere in the UK, but really liked them. It's kind of very high intensity, fun punk
Shout out
music.
Brent.
Shout out Brent. Great
Good job,
guy.
Brent.
Cousin Brent. And then I also kind of was late to the party, but recently got into Sabrina Carpenter. Really like the song Espresso. Been listening to that one a lot. And I think it's just kind of fun, poppy summer music, which I'm in the mood
What's
for
good
right
with
now.
her?
What?
Her like social media clips and music videos and stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
You're a big fan of watching those? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a fan of that. So those are my 3. And then just a quick shout out, Pup, which is a band I brought up a lot on the podcast, kind of a modern punk band that plays really, I think, great music. They just released a new album today, May 1st or May 2nd, whatever today is. So check that out.
What if it sucks? You haven't even heard it yet.
I've listened to part of it and I liked it. And I have enough faith in that band that people like it. So
what if like the second half of it's just like climate
super
change
racist.
isn't real?
Yeah. Then I'm sorry I recommended it, but I really doubt that's what they're saying.
I have a bad habit right now of like when a popular artist gets into controversy, I start listening to their stuff. When Kanye was going at Pete Davidson, I did a deep dive on Kanye music and got really into Kanye. And recently with Zach Bryan and like the Brianna chicken fries stuff, I just started listening to Zach Bryan. And he's probably my favorite country singer. Like he's really good.
I hope
so.
Kanye's
Hopefully nothing comes out horrific about.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff's like the kind of guy that separates art from artists.
But I am. But we almost had the Northern Lights here in Missoula last night. And it got me thinking about when I did see the Northern Lights at my parents' house in Missoula. And it's like maybe the most beautiful thing I've ever seen is the entire sky. And that night I was just like sitting in our driveway with like a sleeping bag or something waiting for him. And I was listening to Incubus Make Yourself on repeat. So I was thinking about that the other night and wanting to re-listen to it. I also remember Wes was watching a movie. I was like, walked in and I was like, hey, you should really come look outside for a second. And he's like, Jeff, I'm watching a movie. He had no confidence in me at that time period.
But I did go outside.
I had to come back in like 2 more times and be like, Wes, I insist.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's do a couple questions from patrons. This one is very topical. This is from Hannah. Hannah says, I live in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, Canada. We get a lot of rattlesnakes in the summer. I usually catch them with a PVC pipe and rope and move them away. But my cats seem to think that the rattle is a toy. One got bit last year and survived. My question is there anything I can do to deter the snakes? I've weed whacked as much as I can, but I live in the woods. Thanks for your insight. First of all, I would encourage you probably not to catch them. Maybe to have someone remove them or to do whatever you can to avoid handling the snakes. But it sounds like you have a decent tactic for it. I would just say, probably should say, don't handle them if you can avoid it. And then as far as creating less habitat for them, you're on the right track. Getting rid of weeds, getting rid of any kind of clutter that they can hide in is the main thing. So you want to decrease any hiding spaces for those rattlesnakes on your property. So if you have like piles of rocks or wood or anything big and flat that they can hide
A
under.
big cave.
A big cave. If you have any caves on your property, you might want to get rid of those. But yeah, it's just trying to decrease things that might be attractive to them. That also includes rodents. So if you have lots of rodents, if there's any way for you to decrease the amount of rodents in an ethical way, that'd be great. And then you can also just put up like simple barriers. Small fences and stuff can be enough to keep rattlesnakes off of your property. So the main thing I would encourage, though, with this question, and not to get on my soapbox too much, is keep your cats inside. Cats kill an insane number of birds every year. They kill a lot of reptiles. They are the world's most invasive animal as far as damage done to native wildlife. So keeping your cat inside is the main thing I would recommend. All right, let's do another one. I was wondering, this one is from Lauren. Lauren says, I was wondering if you could pick a catchphrase, what each of you would choose, either for yourself or for each other.
I like the one in Inglourious Bastards. That's a bingo.
That's a bingo. Is that for you or is that for one of us?
That's a question you have to give us beforehand.
That's real tough.
It's a good question.
It
It's
is.
just I need to think about it for like at least
We got to get
1 minute.
All right. I deleted it already because I always delete them after I ask them. Yeah,
You
you're right.
deleted
Though.
that question already?
Yeah, right after I ask them, I always delete them, or else I forget.
Wow.
Yeah,
Do a Control Z.
Way too fast.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's move on then. We'll just cut that. Bill, you can cut that question, and I'll try and remember.
I kind of like how that went.
Yeah. All right. This one's from Connie. Connie has 2 questions. First of all, your favorite movie soundtrack. We'll answer that one first, and we'll get to the second question. Favorite movie soundtrack.
The one that comes to mind, it's probably not my absolute favorite, but it's the first thing that came to mind, is the one from Drive.
That's a good one.
That one film called Drive.
Yeah.
It's about all the information. I try to think of names and directors. I can't think of anything. Ryan Gosling.
Nicholas Winding Refn or whatever.
Winding
right?
Refn,
yeah. Winding, yeah. Jeff, do you have a favorite movie soundtrack?
You know what? That inspired my choice just now. I'm going to go with Baby Driver.
Ooh,
like the way they incorporate the car to the music and like, I don't know. I love that soundtrack. I also want to shout out Pirates of the Caribbean though, because that one just goes so hard. I was listening to Shane Gillis's podcast with like his friend who's on tires with him. And the guy was saying he listens to Pirates of the Caribbean like pretty much exclusively in the car. And he like just daydreams about being like a hero. And it was really funny.
It's a good idea. I got to start trying that.
I think the one I've probably listened to the most is actually the Forrest Gump soundtrack because it just kind of like spans.
There's
a bunch
no way that's true.
I think it is, but
what's on it?
It's just like a bunch of really good songs from the 70s. But I'm not going to say that's my favorite because it definitely isn't. My favorite, honestly, is Jurassic Park. Like I just think it's like such an iconic one. And when the movie came out, I got the tape and listened to it nonstop. So that's probably what I would pick.
I have an unpopular opinion I think that's John Williams' best soundtrack.
I would agree with you. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, Star Wars, obviously iconic, Indiana Jones, Jaws, etc. But I love the Jurassic Park music.
Yeah. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou is another really good one. I like that soundtrack a lot. All right. And then Connie's second question, what kind of peanut butter did you grow up with? Smooth versus crunchy? And what peanut butter do you prefer now? I have a theory that people generally prefer the opposite kind of peanut butter that they grew up with. I hate to prove you wrong, Connie, but I grew up with smooth peanut butter, and I like smooth peanut butter.
Yeah. I like my peanut butter the way I like my brains.
Smooth. No wrinkles. Mike?
Yeah, I like my peanut butter the way I like my Rumble strips, all chunky. They serve as a warning to lesser people.
What's a Rumble strip?
It's the like strip on the side of the road, all chunky and making sounds when you're chewing on them.
Those would be bad smooth.
No, I'm a crunchy guy. For as long as I remember, I've always just preferred like as crunchy, chunky as possible. So really? I don't know I grew up with it, I guess, but only because that's what I think we all wanted from the beginning. You know, I don't know.
I'd say like just a spoonful of peanut butter. I prefer crunchy, but the smooth is just so nice for like putting on a flat surface of something, you know,
like a slice of bread.
Yeah, like crunchy on a slice of bread, I'll rip that bread apart.
What other flat surfaces are you putting smooth peanut butter on?
Graham crackers, and I'll put some chocolate
Really?
chips on there.
Oh, that's pretty smart, actually.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's my whole thing too, is like I think smooth peanut butter is much more versatile. Like it's better for like sandwiches. And then like I love to take an Oreo and dip it in some peanut butter, which I know Jeff loves to do too. And I
Yeah.
prefer smooth to crunchy in that context too. But if I'm just eating a spoonful of it, I would prefer crunchy.
I'll also buy like very basic chocolate ice cream and then just put some smooth peanut butter on there.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude.
I just like the textures.
All right. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I'm going to do one more. This one's from Nicole. Nicole says, "Hey guys, I have a question for you all. On one of my many re-listens, I heard Mike mention he loves breakfast. So what is better, sweet or savory breakfast?"
Sweet.
That's tough because I feel like the best answer is like they go really
Combo.
well together.
Yeah.
You know? That's what
Like-
makes breakfast so good. So
Yeah,
I don't
like
want you're
bacon
making
with
me do the
pancakes.
Sophie's choice right now.
Fair enough. But you
You
have
know?
to pick one.
And
if
like
you
I'll
have to.
take the boy. So in this case, that would probably be savory.
All right. I think if I have to pick one, I'm picking sweet, but I 100% agree with you, Jeff.
But in the Sophie's choice part too.
I
do
need
you?
people to slow down and really think about what Jeff just did there for a minute. You can rewind if you need to.
You would take the boy.
I don't remember Sophie's Choice.
Mm.
What will you set it up
He
for us
would.
real quick?
It's like, yeah, you would not have allowed that to just happen if you knew. What's the? She's like the best actress ever. What's her name?
Streep.
Yeah, Meryl Streep. And the Nazis are making her choose. She can have either her daughter or her son, and the other one's going to a concentration camp, and they make her choose on the spot.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I probably would have shut that down. Yeah.
yeah.
Too late. Keep it
Now
in,
I
Bill.
have to leave it.
And she
yeah.
chooses the boy.
All right.
Spoiler.
Yeah. I am with you on your breakfast thing though. I agree that like for me, the ideal breakfast incorporates like a protein, some eggs, and then something sweet too. And a nice cup of coffee. So yeah. All right. That's gonna be it for our questions today. Before we leave, Jeff, you got anything you want to add to our conversation on Venom?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think Venom is something more consumed than injected.
You're wrong there. Never mind. I'm sorry I opened this up. Mike, did you have any other categories?
No, sir.
All right. Well, we'll go then. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Dr. Greene, for being on our podcast. We know he's a very busy guy. Like we were supposed to record this yesterday, and he had so many cases that he had to work on that he couldn't. So this happens a lot more than I even realized. Bites from venomous snakes. So be careful out there. The season's really starting for a lot of people. Listen to what he said. Be careful about where you step, where you stick your hands, appropriate footwear in places where there might be lots of venomous snakes. And if you do get bitten, get to help as quickly as possible and then advocate for yourself. Make sure that you are getting the best help possible to treat your venomous snake bite. All right. We'll see you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.